Namaste. Shame is a natural and a very basic human emotion. It is central to all in our everyday life, and yet there are very few therapists who are clear about the concept and healing aspects of shame. And today, to discuss this topic, we have with us psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, sir, can we start with what is shame?
Shame is a psychological entity. It is not a thought, it is not an idea, it is an emotion that we feel. It is one of those primary and basic emotions that human beings have. It is found across age, no matter whether you are a child or an adult or an old person, it is found across lifetime. And it has a, a very disturbing aspect to it in the sense it is not a pleasant feeling like happiness, joy, the feeling of euphoria. It is basically a distressing feeling, a very uncomfortable feeling. Therefore, we call it a negative feeling based upon its outcomes and how it is felt. So it is a negative emotion and it is both. It can be conscious, it can be unconscious. So we can have shame which is consciously felt in our conscious mind, or we may have shame which is not felt by us, we don't know, but it is in our unconscious mind. So shame can be both conscious and unconscious. Shame also has a moral element related to it, that it comes up when we have done some transgression. We have done something we ought not to do. And therefore, it has a very strong superego element to it, that it is basically an emotion related to the superego. Both shame and guilt are emotions related to superego, but they are very different emotions. Shame is an emotion which has a very heavy superego component, and this has three elements to it. You feel shameful when one, you have undertaken a transgression of a moral value. You have done what you ought not to do, what society does not approve of, what conventions and customs don't approve of. So shame arises one when there is a transgression of accepted codes and values. Two, shame arises when you don't do what you ought to do. So there is a thou shall not element of shame, and there is a thou shall element of shame. So it arises when either you do something you ought not to do, or you don't do something you ought to do. Or it also arises in the context of your low capability and inferiority. That you may want to do what you ought to do, you try to do, but you don't measure up, you don't rise up to the challenge, you don't have the competence, and therefore there is a deep sense of shame related to your incompetence and inferiority. So shame is an emotion related to morality, and it has two uh, fundamental components related to it. One, it has an aspect of morality, right, of aspect of transgression, and second, an aspect of uh, intention, expectation, and inferiority. So you can look at the taboo part of morality, the intent part of morality, and the capability part of morality. So this is how the uh, emotion is, and it's a very important emotion,
Hmm.
very strong emotion, and it is basically a social emotion.
So, sir, how are shame and guilt related then?
Both are related to morality, both are superego related entities, and both arise when the superego is displaced in some way. So shame and guilt both arise on all these three parameters. Either a taboo is broken, or in terms of intention and expectation is not fulfilled, expectation of your own or somebody else, or in terms of capability, you don't rise up, you don't measure up to the occasion. So let us say uh, a woman is caught in an extramarital affair. Now that is transgression of a taboo, transgression of a social taboo. Thou shall not has been crossed, and therefore guilt or shame or both can arise. Second can be a person sees an innocent person being beaten up, but does not go to save him. Now that is where he does not rise to the occasion, and therefore there is a expectation breach. He is not doing what he ought to do, and therefore to different degrees, either shame or guilt or both may arise. And the third may be he goes to save that person but cannot save, and therefore he has shame or guilt or both related to his incapability, his weaknesses, his powerlessness. So there can be shame or guilt both arising out of a taboo breaking or not having the right intention or not having the right capability. So we have a taboo based emotion and expectation based emotion and a inferiority based emotion, powerlessness based emotion. All the three give rise to them, but there is a difference. Guilt is an individual emotion, essentially, whereas shame is a social emotion. So there are two kinds of moralities, guilt-based morality, shame-based morality, and in all of us, both of them are present. So, for example, uh, let us say if a person A has an affair with a woman B, and both of them are cheating their partners, but they don't feel anything bad about it. All they want is that they should not be caught by anyone. Now, this is a very common phenomena in the world. Now, this is a shame-based morality. They don't have an individual guilt that I am doing something I ought not to do. I should not be cheating on my partner. They don't have guilt. They are afraid of what will people say if they are caught. So the fear is of shame. The fear is not of guilt. If they are put, let us say, in another country where nobody knows them, they won't have any problem at all. Because the problem is not inside, the problem is from outside. So shame is a very social oriented problem, society oriented emotion. So you can have a shame based morality that you may not do certain things because you are afraid what will people say. But if you are put into another country where no one knows you, you can easily do those things. But there are certain things which you will not do even when you are put in a situation where nobody can find out what you are doing. Those kind of moral controls are because of guilt. That is internal. That even if there is no chance of anybody finding it, I would still not do it. So that is a guilt-based morality. Now the response to both of them is different. When you have too much of guilt, it generally leads to self-destruction and anger towards oneself. And the feeling is felt as something disgusting, something repulsive, and a very difficult feeling to feel. And mostly felt in the chest area when the full feeling comes up. Horizontally in the chest area. That's the most common way it is felt, the guilt part of it. Shame is different. Shame is felt not in terms of as much anger towards oneself, as much in form of contraction and shrinking of the self. And this leads to a withdrawal and avoidance. So extreme shame leads to more of withdrawal and avoidance and light anger, but not as heavy anger and self-destruction as it is found in guilt. Both of them can have elements of self-destruction, can lead to elements of self-destruction, but guilt that way is far more self-destructive in its intensity than shame. And in terms of finding it out in therapy, guilt generally is far more hidden than shame, except for one group of people who benefit from cohesion therapy, in which case shame can be more deeply rooted than guilt. But in general, guilt is generally more deeply rooted and difficult to find and accept compared to shame. Thirdly, you can experience both these emotions separately. Like in some situations, you can experience only guilt. In some situations, you can experience only shame, or you can experience the both together. In some situations, you can feel both guilt and shame. And in some situations, guilt can lead to shame and shame can lead to guilt.
So precisely, then what comes first? The guilt comes first or shame?
It depends upon which school you follow.
Okay.
It's a complicated question because each school has answered this question differently. For Sigmund Freud, uh, superego essentially came into being when the Oedipus was dissolved, and we are talking about 4 to 5 years of age. Some people will say 7 years of age. So, because shame and guilt both are superego related issues, from a strictly classical Freudian perspective, one opinion would be that it would come into existence only after the resolution of Oedipus. To whatever extent it is resolved, not a 100% resolved, but once the resolution process of the Oedipus begins, guilt and shame come into picture. Second opinion within the Freudian school itself is that shame is related to the anal phase. Because in the anal phase, when the toilet training happens, there is an element of disgust and shame felt by the infant. In the sense, the uh, elders make the person feel that feeling. So this is where the uh, Freudian school puts it either at the end of Oedipus 4 to 5 years or anal phase 1.5 to 3 years, or let us say some people will say 1.3 to 2 to 4 years. Oral will be 0 to 2 and anal will be 2 to 4. Now, if you come to Erik Erikson, he puts this idea of uh, shame versus autonomy as being important in the age group of 18 months to 30 months. I think, if I'm not right, 18 to 13 months, 30 months. So for Erik Erikson, that is the point. If we come to Klein, then Klein talks about guilt being in operation even before 2.5 years of age and Oedipus happening at around 2.5 years of age. So for Klein, since guilt is in operation even before the Oedipus, even before 2.5 years, her date of Oedipus, then it means that guilt is almost inborn in Klein's conceptualization. She does not talk about shame, and therefore we are not clear whether shame also is inborn like guilt. It remains an open question in the Kleinian context. But I'm sure if guilt is in operation before 2.5 years, we can make a conjecture that shame also would be in operation before 2.5 years. How early, we may not be sure within that framework. That is how the Kleinian framework sees. But in that context, guilt seems to precede shame. So, in the Kleinian context. Now, when we look at Kohut, we get a completely new picture of the human mind. And in Kohut's version of things, shame comes into the center stage. Because for Kohut, our need for omnipotence, exhibitionism, and as a result of it, healthy self, narcissistic self, and shame, these are at the center of his theory. So for Kohut, what he believes is that omnipotence is inborn in all of us. We all have a need for omnipotence. And exhibitionism also is inborn in all of us. We all have a need to exhibit our omnipotence. And we want elders, the caregivers, to acknowledge and admire our omnipotence, our exhibitionism of omnipotence. And if our exhibitionism does not uh, get a response of admiration and acknowledgement, we develop intense shame. And from that point of view, Kohut's shame would come in the first year, much before anything else comes into picture in terms of guilt and everything else. And for Kohut, this shame is at the root of many of our problems, most particularly the narcissistic personality disorder. That this shame is acted upon because it is unbearable by a reaction formation defense, and we go into grandiosity. So the grandiosity there is a response as much to shame as much to powerlessness. And there, the continuum of shame to fame becomes very important. That the narcissistic personality essentially is moving on this continuum of shame to fame. And that is true of most people, not only those with narcissistic personality disorder, that most of us are moving on a shame to fame continuum. And this shame to fame continuum, with the normal zone being in between, inferiority on one side, superiority on the other side, is a continuum on which most people move. The healthy people being in the optimum zone, not healthy being on the extremes. But uh, there, shame becomes fundamental and it comes into operation very early and is far more significant than other variables. So it strictly depends upon which school you take up. If you take up the Kleinian school, perhaps guilt will precede shame and be more important than shame. If you take Freudian school, again, guilt becomes more important than shame. However, shame may come before guilt or may come after guilt, based upon whether you put Oedipus in the center or the anal stage in the center. And if you look at Kohut, then obviously shame precedes everything else and is more significant than everything else in terms of the, the comparable concepts we are referring to.
Okay. So what role shame has in development of our self-esteem, and how is it understood in this context?
One way of looking at many pathologies is to look at it from self-esteem stability point of view. In CBT also you believe that inferiority and I am not good enough, right? That part is very important in genesis of pathology. So I am not good enough and inferiority, uh, which leads to a very low self-esteem, is very important generator of pathology, often the genesis of pathology, in many schools of psychotherapy, including CBT, psychoanalysis, and many others. In psychoanalysis, Adler made quite a central use of it, and Kohut made quite a central use of it, but it is true in many schools in different ways. Now, when you look at self-esteem related pathologies, let us say narcissistic personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, any disorder where inferiority and avoidance is at the root. In all those situations, one way to look at those pathologies is to look at them as self-esteem stabilization problems. That self-esteem is either too grandiose or in the zone of inferiority. It is not in the optimum zone of normalcy. So when the self-esteem is not in the optimum zone of normalcy, many things can happen. If it goes on the lower side, you can have a avoidant personality disorder. If it goes on a higher side, you can have a narcissistic personality disorder, or you can have many other uh, anxiety issues, avoidance issues, superiority issues, and so on. So from that point of view, the whole idea is to stabilize self-esteem. And shame is very important when you look at the mind from that point of view. That shame essentially is an accompaniment of inferiority, of rejection, of contempt. And this inferiority, rejection, contempt is the core for generating shame, apart from the taboo transgression. So for anybody who looks at pathology from a self-esteem stabilization point of view, addressing inferiority and the shame which often relates to that inferiority and which has pent up over a period of time, that comes to the center. So from a self-esteem stabilization point of view, inferiority, rage, shame, using reaction formation to that for uh, getting into contempt of others, getting into grandiosity, this whole package becomes a central constellation to be unraveled and resolved.
So, answer is the shame gender specific or
It is not
same?
gender, in terms of its absolute quantum, it is not gender specific, but in terms of its manifestation, there is a gender aspect. Like uh, for men, shame is less related to uh, taboo transgression. It is there. I'm not saying it is not there, but compared to the other gender, the taboo transgression shame for the same act is less, but uh, the expectation related shame and the inferiority and powerlessness related shame, not rising up to the occasion, not measuring up to the occasion, that is far greater in everyday life than just the taboo oriented shame. In case of women, the taboo oriented shame is much larger and more in operation, more pervasively than expectation related shame or powerlessness related shame.
And is shame related to narcissism?
Very much so, because often we find in narcissistic personality disorder that shame is very deeply repressed. And that is where often uh, the Kernberg's approach of pure interpretation, the classical psychoanalytic approach, often does not work. And the Cohusian approach of holding has to be brought into play so that the person lives out the grandiosity in the therapy room to whatever extent it can when the holding scaffolding is provided. And after that happens, or while that is happening, a deeply buried sense of shame comes up, which happened when the exhibitionism of the child was rejected. And that rejection had the point of contempt, of indifference, of rejection, of uh, not somebody not being interesting enough, not being good enough to be attended to or admired. So that deeply rooted sense of shame comes up, and that having come up often results in quite an amount of cure. So it's central to narcissistic personality disorder, and in most cases, particularly in one group of narcissistic personalities who are more confident, successful, and more exhibitionistic, where some features of histrionicity combined with narcissism, the shame is completely disavowed, unacknowledged, unaccepted, disowned, and it goes and deeply is repressed in the unconscious. So in that area, allowing the shame to come up or even facilitating it to come up, that becomes one of the core elements of therapy. Not the only element, but definitely a very significant element.
And is shame then related to personality disorders?
Yes, directly to narcissistic personality disorder and avoidant personality disorder. But we also find that in mostly all personality disorders, you always have one personality disorder as the major problem and features of other personality disorders coming in. The person may not be having features to an extent that you can be diagnosed, but uh, definitely features are there. So in that sense of features, every personality disorder is actually in terms of features a mixed personality disorder. Not from a diagnostic point of view, but from a healing point of view. From diagnostic point of view, he may not qualify for more than one. But from a healing point of view, there are features of many other personality disorders, and therefore, from a psychotherapy healing point of view, in general, you are always dealing with a mixed personality disorder, except in rare cases. In most cases, you are dealing with a mixed personality disorder where you have one major disorder and then very strong features of other disorders. So, shame you find comes up in almost all personality disorders, either because of the major disorder itself or because of the features of other disorders which are present in the major along with the major disorder. So you find that guilt, shame, anxiety, denial, and lack of integration, these are common strong elements to be dealt with in any personality disorder. And one of the elements why there is so much of commonality in terms of all personality disorder therapy is that uh, perhaps it may have to do with the genesis of all personality disorders. It may be that most personality disorders, or let me say all personality disorders, may not be in all cases, but in most cases, they may have a common root. One common root that I perceive and I believe in is of object loss. That early life object loss result in a series of phenomena from which one escapes differently based upon other dynamics, other variables of the personality. But the object loss and the state following the object loss, that is common in my belief to most personality disorders. And this object loss happens after a few months of good experience with the object, and that is why what we have got is a personality disorder and not psychosis. So in most personality disorders, I believe the person has had very good experience for a few months and then object loss took place. So there was some positive strength built up after which the tragic object loss took place, and that tragic object loss led to a very difficult state, and how we escape from that state determines which personality disorder he developed. And I have given details of this in my model of personality disorders called Valley Junction model. And in that model, I talk about how object loss leads to a valley experience where you just go down in terms of everything. And from that valley, how you jump onto the mountain and which peak you jump to, that determines which personality disorder you have. And
Yes.
this is where perhaps that we see that in any personality disorder, we always encounter shame, guilt, denial, avoidance, fear of closeness. These are common to all personality disorders.
We've done a talk on that Valley Junction model.
Yes, Valley Junction model, right.
So, sir, typically, how is shame dealt in a therapy session?
Uh, the most common thing is that if the shame is conscious, then the person acknowledges it, accepts it, feels it, and lets it go. And he revisits more and more incidents where shame was generated, and more of it becomes conscious, fully felt, and the person is able to analyze it, understand it, feel it fully, let it go, and take corrective action for future. So this would be a normal way of looking at shame in therapy. Now, when the shame is deeply repressed, then the person may not even know that I have such an element of shame, and it may be uh, worked upon by a reaction formation defense or a denial and repression defense. And the person may be actually on the other end, where instead of shame, he looks hyper confident, and in some cases, almost lightly, mildly, or even heavily histrionic. So, in those cases, deeper work is necessary in terms of using the Valley Junction model or any other model that one is using, but deeper psychoanalytic work is necessary to access those parts which are repressed, which are in denial, and in that free association, dream analysis, and all other tools they help us. Analysis of how the patient reports of a real life situation, how he behaved and felt in a particular situation. So the analysis of his reporting of his life, dream analysis, analysis of free association, analysis of the way he relates to the therapist. All that deeper work is necessary for bringing out shame, which is repressed, disowned, acted upon by defenses, to be accepted, acknowledged, integrated, felt, and catharted. That is second. And in some cases, where we are dealing with a very primal shame of the type that Kohut talks about, that kind of shame, for that a very long holding is necessary. And we have to go from a classical stance to a Kohutian stance to really allow the person experience the therapist as a self-object, live out his grandiosity, and the therapist becomes a self-object mostly by omission rather than by commission, allows the person to feel his grandiosity, and then the deeply hidden shame comes out. And that is a very great discovery by itself, because often the person cannot remember when it first occurred. The memory is still too early, and memory is too early to really remember. But and it is so subtle and so nuanced that even caregivers may not remember that memory, that it was something significant that happened. And therefore, the person may not remember fully the event, but he does feel some deeply seated shame come up, which is experienced, acknowledged, assimilated, and catharted out. And if the person gets full memory, nothing like it. It's the best of it. These
Right.
are different ways of looking at shame. And of course, in shame, because the value system is deeply involved as to what you should be ashamed of and what you should not be, cognitive work on the schema of the value system is very necessary. So that also is a very important element of managing shame, and the behavioral aspect of practicing not to feel shameful in certain situations where you believe you should not be feeling shameful. That also is a great tool and a great facilitator. So complementing our classical approach with schema work and some behavioral practice is a good way to go.
So are there tools in spirituality and holistic healing to heal shame? Sorry.
Spirituality offers two very important techniques. One is the tantric techniques, where it's a very iconoclastic and how do you put it? I'm not getting the word. Uh, Subversive. It's a very iconoclastic, subversive, and defiant school of spirituality. And there, often you are given practice to do what is taboo in the normal society. And those practices done alone with another individual and also in group. They are some of very powerful techniques of overcoming shame and also disgust. I'm not referring to the disgust of guilt. I'm referring to the disgust of something filthy. They are also very good techniques to overcome our ordinary fears of something dreadful in the physical world. Some object that we, or some location or some event that we feel is very dreadful. So Tantra has some very powerful techniques. And then we have this whole technique of Avishkar, which is almost like a psychodrama. So that also is quite a powerful technique to overcome many things, including lack of objects, not lack of objects, but let me say experience of certain fantasies, attempt at internalizing certain objects, identification with some objects, overcoming shame, wish fulfillment, uh, accessing some certain occult parts of the personality or parapsychological parts of the personality. And so this is one part. Psychodrama in holistic healing category offers a very good way of overcoming shame. There are many designed psychodramas for this particular objective of overcoming shame. On a lateral point of view, we can always use homeopathy, Reiki, pranic healing to reduce shame or reduce the defense against shame and make it more supple, more flexible, more available, and reduce its intensity so that we can manage it much easier and much better in our classical therapy approach. So both spirituality and holistic healing, they have techniques and tools to heal shame.
Right, which needs to be explored more then.
True. It may not heal completely, but
Yes.
definitely be a very good, very effective aid, very potent aid in our mainstream processes.
Well, today in our series of psychoanalysis and philosophy, we have discussed shame, and it was a pleasure having you with us, sir. And till we meet next time, thank you and namaste.
Namaste.